Hello, everybody. Although my pose may in some small way resemble that wonder of the ancient world, the Colossus of Rhodes, actually, I'm Lowell Thomas, standing in front of what will soon be one of the wonders of the modern world. Over the years, it has been my good fortune and pleasure to report to you from the 7 continents and the 7 seas. South America, Africa, spectacular Alaska, exotic Tibet. And now, if I can be heard over the roar of all this machinery of preparation, I'd like to give you a preview of the wonder of the modern world. Here on this very site is to be erected, they're doing it at the moment, the symbol of the theme of the New York World's Fair, the Unisphere, being built by United States Steel. Robert Moses, president of the fair, has guided its destiny from the beginning. How will this fair differ from other world's fairs?
Well, it's bigger. There's more to see, more ground to cover, better exhibits, more of them. It's on a huge scale. Measured by acreage, numbers of exhibits, by any other norm or measure, it's on a much bigger scale.
650 acres and over 200 exhibitors. Here is being built the biggest, most fascinating show ever created by man. Already there is being built a fantasy of color and shapes that promise one of the most exciting events of our time. Under construction is the Port of New York, New Jersey exhibit building. When completed, there'll be a heliport on the roof, the air gateway to the fair. Beneath, a restaurant and thrilling movies in the round. The General Motors Futurama building with a dramatic ride of the future that will accommodate 70,000 visitors daily. Ford will feature a unique automobile trip through Fantasyland, especially created by Walt Disney. A permanent hall of science to be built by the city of New York. Life-size prehistoric animals are under construction for Sinclair's Dinoland to dramatize the wonderful story of petroleum. Greyhound, the post-house restaurant of the future. The Mobile Pavilion. Test your driving skill in a simulated mobile economy run. And in the Transportation and Travel Pavilion, you'll take a simulated moon trip. Transportation exhibits at the New York World's Fair. I'm sitting here in the World's Fair Amphitheater, where you'll enjoy a spectacular stage and water show conceived by the producer of stage shows at the Radio City Music Hall, Leon Leonidoff, in association with Meyer Davis, famous orchestra leader. This is the Lake Amusement Area, where showmen from all over the world will present the finest in entertainment. A wax museum, famous paintings and historical events brought to life in wax. The AMF monorail, an automatic air-conditioned ride around the Lake Amusement Area. The dancing waters, beautiful music set to a changing pattern of multicolored fountains. You'll see the Santa Maria anchored in Meadow Lake, an exact replica of Columbus' flagship. Taste delicious Chinese specialties in the Chunking Rickshaw Inn. John Ringling North's Continental-style Circus. The Music Hall, presenting a century of American musical comedy. Nearby, the Jones Beach Marine Theater will offer Guy Lombardo's exciting musical, Around the World in 80 Days. And when night falls, a lovely fountain show with music, fireworks, and a vivid kaleidoscope of color. The crack of a baseball bat, the cry, Homer, from 55,000 voices here in the William A. Shea Stadium next to the World's Fair. This will be the home of the New York Mets, beginning 1964. Here, too, will be played the All-Star Baseball game with stars like Willie Mays and Mickey Mantle. New York City and the Fair will also be host to the 1964 Olympic Trials. At the Fair's arena, seen here or in the pavilion, you'll see fencing, judo, gymnastics, and wrestling, and the Danish gym team to be seen at the Fair's sports program. The girls are a study in lovely precision. At the time of the 1939 World's Fair, I reported from this exact spot. In fact, did my broadcast here. In the days when nylon, plastics, and television were the sensation. But today, the industrial giants of the world are preparing a mighty new spectacle here. Here where steel is taking on the shape of things to come. IBM's People Wall will transport you upward to a theater and film spectacular designed by Charles Eames. General Electric's Progress Land includes Walt Disney's amazing animated figures and an actual demonstration of atomic fusion. The Kodak Pavilion will present photography as a truly universal language. In the Bell System exhibit, you'll ride through a series of theaters dramatizing the past and future of communication. Traveler's Insurance, umbrella of protection, and man's triumph over the hazards of life. Electric Power and Light's Tower of Light, the brightest beam ever created. Uncle Ben will star in the brightest show on earth. At RCA, you'll peer behind the scenes of an ultra-modern, full-color television broadcast. The gas industry's Festival of Gas will feature the latest in gas appliances and a unique gourmet restaurant. Coca-Cola's World of Refreshment will house a melodious electronic carillon. Johnson's Wax, a jewel of a building with a suspended theater within its circular colonnade. At Scott Paper, you'll relax in a beautifully landscaped park, an elegant interior rest area. Formica's Hilltop House, showcasing the newest products of the American Cyanamide Corporation. The F&M Schaefer Brewing Company, a buffet and the largest beer bar in the world. National Cash Register Company will demonstrate tomorrow's world of automation. 7-Up presents authentic international sandwiches and entertainment. You'll relive the turn of the century at Rheingold's gay little old New York. DuPont will have 2 theaters and an exhibit area where fairgoers will see better things for better living through chemistry. Westinghouse will bury a new time capsule documenting man's exciting progress over the last 25 years. The Pavilion of American Interiors, the newest and best in furnishings for your home. To the Boy Scout exhibit will come 40,000 Scouts during National Jamboree Week alone. Pepsi-Cola presents Walt Disney's It's a Small World, a tribute to UNICEF. The attractive exhibit building of the Simmons Beauty Rest Center. The House of Good Taste exhibit, a 3-home showcase designed by the country's leading architects. The Better Living Pavilion will cover major areas in everyday life. The exciting new world of industry at the New York World's Fair. As some of you know, I have spent much of my life roaming this planet in search of the unusual, the interesting, the exotic. But you, right here in the international area, can visit more than 45 countries and see much of their best in peaceful competition. Shop in Hong Kong for handmade rugs, jade, and carved ivory. Step into Switzerland's restaurant and then treat the family to the Swiss Sky Ride. See Balinese dancers in Indonesia. In the 3-story Mexican pavilion, native art and handicrafts. Pakistan will emphasize her historical past, present, and future. The Austrian pavilion will be made of gleaming wood in an A shape, symbolizing Austria's glorious mountains and forests. Sweden will emphasize her creativity in arts and products. The Republic of China, special exhibits in a traditional motif. The exhibit building of Sierra Leone will symbolize its famous mountains. India's theme, Progress in Democracy, will be dramatized by relics of the past and aspirations to the future. The Hall of Free Enterprise, presenting a total concept of economic life in a free community. Japan's participation is extensive. One exhibit by its government, another by industry. Ireland's exhibit will unfold that country's rich literary heritage. The Caribbean Pavilion, limbo dancers and the rhythms of calypso singers and a steel band. And at the International Plaza, many other nations and foreign organizations will be represented. Nations from around the globe pledged to a theme of common understanding at the New York World's Fair. The central theme of the fair, peace through understanding, will gain in depth and perspective through impressive religious and cultural exhibits and events. For the first time in the history of World's Fairs, there will be exhibits presented by many major faiths. At the Protestant Center, all Protestant groups will exhibit together. Towering over the Mormon Pavilion will be a replica of the towers of the Salt Lake City Temple. Within the Christian Science Pavilion will be exhibits from 40 or more countries. The Billy Graham Pavilion will house a 600-seat theater with films shown every half hour. The death of Pope John the 23rd shocked and saddened the world. In the words of Robert Moses,
I believe John the 23rd will cast a shadow like that of Peter, the rock on which this church is founded, and in civil affairs of Abraham Lincoln, who also had the common touch and spoke for all of mankind.
The decision of the Vatican to take part in the World's Fair set a new precedent. Pope John the 23rd approved a loan for the duration of the fair of Michelangelo's masterpiece, the Pietà, his famed sculpture of Mary holding the crucified Christ. In Rome, Pope John activated a radio signal transmitted overseas to the fairgrounds that started a pile driver breaking ground for the Vatican Pavilion. Not only with Pietà, but other rare art masterpieces from the Vatican will be on view, along with sacred objects and documents telling the story of the Christian faith. Three former presidents are proud to serve as chairman for the fair: Herbert Hoover, Dwight D. Eisenhower, Harry S. Truman. And here on this 4.5-acre site is rising the magnificent Federal Building. Its theme, Challenge to Greatness. Here will be exhibit halls, a theater, and tributes to our American heritage. At the groundbreaking ceremony, our late President John F. Kennedy met Robert Moses, president of the fair.
We have roamed these United States and literally combed the globe for pavilions and exhibits which will reflect the achievements of all men in industry, culture, the arts, and harmless entertainment. We confidently expect more than 70 million visitors to an unforgettable pageant.
Then the president.
I want the people of the world to visit this fair and all the various exhibits of our American industrial companies and the foreign companies who are most welcome, and to come to the American exhibit, the exhibit of the United States, and see what we've accomplished through a system of freedom.
And many of our states will exhibit. New York State will feature the Tent of Tomorrow and a circular theater with panoramic motion pictures. In the New York City building, there will be several exhibits. Here's a part of a giant model now under construction of the entire New York metropolitan area. 840,000 buildings in astonishing detail. Here's New York's lovely summer festival queen, getting a close-up view. Dick Button's Ice Travaganza with Olympic skating champions will also be in the city building. On the shore of Meadow Lake, Hawaii will feature food specialties at the Five Volcanoes restaurant. Florida will have the first live porpoise show at any fair and a 100-foot-high citrus tower. Missouri's Lindbergh was the first in air, her Alan Shepard first in space. New Jersey will celebrate its 300th anniversary. The New England states, a village green and country store. West Virginia proudly exhibits as the land of relaxation. And Maryland will dramatize the Battle of Fort McHenry and the writing of the Star-Spangled Banner. Our own United States of America at the New York World's Fair. A fair is news, often big news. This is our press building from where we tell the world about new exhibits, visiting celebrities, ticket sales. The building dedication was attended by hundreds of newsmen, radio and television reporters, publicists. Then a ribbon cutting, a typewriter ribbon. News was made at the fair when General Douglas MacArthur paid a visit. In the model room, the general saw the exhibits in miniature. The fair will revive our lagging patriotic spirit, the general said. It was a most pleasant visit from a grand old soldier. Mr. Moses, there are a number of questions that I presume all prospective visitors would want to ask. The first one would be, well, how do you get here?
Well, you get here by every form of locomotion known to man.
By ship, international arrivals from countries all over the world. The excitement of a visit not only to the fair, but to the city all people seem to want to see. By plane, too, the arrival of visitors on any of 39 airlines that serve New York from abroad. This is Idlewild Airport, the international door to the fair, and only 6 miles away. LaGuardia Airport is our domestic gateway to New York. You'll arrive at a new passenger terminal 6 times as big as the old one, and part of an overall $115 million modernization program. Of course, millions and millions of us will come by automobile. The arterial approaches here at the fair will be virtually brand new and will become a permanent part of New York's great highway system. Biggest in an imposing array of facilities is the mighty Verrazzano Narrows Bridge, being constructed by Triborough Bridge and Tunnel Authority. As chairman of the authority, Robert Moses talks to Raymond Corbett, president of New York State AFL-CIO, and Otmar Ammann, designer of the new bridge. The Narrows Bridge will be finished in the 2nd year of the fair. You may drive over it on your way into New York, or over another of the city's great links to the nation. New housing facilities are being built throughout the metropolitan area. By opening day, 350 hotels and motels with pleasant accommodations will be ready for you in all price ranges. Some, like this one, right off the fairgrounds. Others in New York itself are familiar and comfortable. Still others are brand new with the gloss and sheen of modernity. Some motels are right in town, and parking is no problem. And staying in New York is fun. From the tallest building, a view that is unsurpassed. A delightful lunch. And a cooling spring breeze. Curtain time along the Great White Way. Even buying tickets to the fair. Tickets are on sale now all over the country. Many city institutions will sponsor joint programs with the fair. The Guggenheim Museum, the New York Public Library, the Museum of Modern Art, the Metropolitan Museum of Art, and at the magnificent Lincoln Center for the Performing Arts, the New York State Theater to open in time for the fair, and Philharmonic Hall. Concerts, plays, opera and ballet at the great Lincoln Center. Getting to the fair from the city is easy. Take a subway, bus, railroad, pleasure boat, or even your own boat to the World's Fair Marina. Over 800 craft will be able to dock here for a visit to the fair. Or you can even take a helicopter from 3 New York heliports, one on the roof of the Pan American building. Helicopters will make regular flights to the fair. They'll land at the Port of New York, New Jersey exhibit building. World's fairs, as a rule, are ephemeral. Will there be anything lasting at this one?
Oh, yes, indeed. In the first place, we'll have several new buildings, but over and above that, we're going to finish Flushing Meadow Park with the receipts of the fair. And when I say that, I think it'll be the finest park in the city of New York. It's right at the geographical and population center, and I think it will cost about $10 million to finish the park. The landscaping will be here, the trees will still be here. About half the utilities have been put in on a permanent basis, so they'll stay. And this will be a great park, the park.
But in the meantime, construction goes on so rapidly, in fact, that what you see here is already ancient history. It won't be long now. So plans and preparations race ahead for the opening of the gates to the New York World's Fair. And you'll be one of the 70 million, perhaps 80 million visitors to see this, one of the most spectacular shows of all time. And now, until April 22nd, 1964, so long.
Ernest Mooney Warther was born 1885 in an old log schoolhouse in Dover, Ohio. He loved to tell people this was the reason he never needed much formal education. Mooney never knew his father, who died when he was a toddler, leaving his mother with 5 children, 20 cents, and a cow. The older boys took jobs to help keep the family together, but 5-year-old Mooney was too young to work in the local mill. So he helped by herding cows belonging to area families. He kept this job for 9 years, until age 14, earning a penny a day, and the nickname Mooney, taken from the Swiss word Mounet, meaning bull of the herd. As 5-year-old Mooney walked the cows to pasture one summer morning in 1891, he made an important discovery. Buried in the soft brown dirt on the winding path was a dusty treasure that would help him carve his name into the pages of history and the hearts of millions. This simple moment would shape Mooney's future and enhance ours as he went on to sculpt beautiful monuments to our nation's railroad history.
Hello and welcome to another woodworking adventure. I'm Frank Byers for Woodcraft, and we're here in Dover, Ohio at the Ernest Mooney Warther Museum. I'm here with Mark Warther, grandson of Ernest, and we're standing in front of the original shop where Ernest did all of his famous carvings. So it's a pleasure to meet you, sir.
Nice meeting you.
Let's bring all the people into Ernest's world.
Yes.
And begin the tour of his workshop.
Please come in, we'll show you. Well, folks, I'm Mark Warther, and this is my granddad's original workshop, built in this spot in 1912. It's 100 years old, and it's amazing what came out of this shop, which you will see throughout the museum. And what you're going to see carved, the trains of ivory and ebony, was nothing but a hobby. They were never sold, and for a living, he actually made knives in this shop.
Mooney needed better tools himself. He was frustrated with knives that didn't conform to his needs or his hands.
Well, Dad was getting pretty serious with carving as a late teenager. He wasn't satisfied with store-bought knives, so he made his own. And this is what he made. Design and make of his own. The object was a big handle that filled the hand from cramping, long hours of use. A hump had developed to fit between the fingers, locked it right in, a wonderful feel. All the power's in the handle. Made little blades, kept in the handle, and interchangeable. Back spring popped up, there popped down, it holds it in. And he always said when you carve, if the blade is longer than your thumb, for most carvings, the blade will get in your road. There's a frame of knives, 6 knives and 139 blades that he designed, built and used. The 139 blades in that frame, every one of them will fit in this knife. Interchangeable.
Mooney built this beautiful and functional ivory-handled knife with its interchangeable blades to fit his hand perfectly. This design has become a knife for family members only and is not offered for sale.
Well, folks, thank you for coming to the Warther Museum today. And you folks keep us going. We do appreciate it. My granddad designed his own tools to carve with, came up with a carving knife that would fit his hand. The blades are in the handle, and they interchange. And young lady, I gave you a block, didn't I? Mm-hmm. Are there any slices in that block? Not yet, but I'm going to put 10. 10 cuts. My granddad found out as a kid, 10 cuts placed into a block of wood in the right order, angles, and depths will turn a block into a pair of working pliers. As a teenager, he kept practicing this until he obtained a speed of carving these in 10 seconds. He made these up for every kid he ever met. My dad did the same. We still do. Lately, we've been making 50, 60 of these a day. And I'm starting to pray for school to start already. I'm going to double check those 2 cuts. And if all 10 cuts are correct, that solid block works. Oh. And there you go. Cool. Don't be pinching boys with those. You're welcome.
Mark, how many would you say that you've made of those over the years?
I've been averaging 20,000 pliers a year. I've been doing that for 20-some years. We estimate my granddad made 750,000 of those in his lifetime. My dad matched that number, and it's still a tradition here that all kids go home with those. Of course, we have them in the gift shop. We make all those. In the spring and the fall, when the kids aren't here, then the ladies take them home. We make a pile of pliers. But that's the trademark of the Warthers.
Let's take a peek at some of the amazing innovations in this room.
And here's the old fireplace where he did the shop and also done the forging. The anvil is sitting there where the commando knives were forged and many other knives that I've made in the forge.
That's right, and the fireplace operates without a bellows. No wasted motion. Mooney figured out that the updraft from the chimney would do the trick. Aided by a metal bonnet he would place over this iron grate. He let Mother Nature do the work for him.
Just a natural draft is all. Oh, they get hot.
How hot?
Hotter than hell.
Let's step into the library where it's cooler. Mooney kept his reference books in these shelves. No wasted space. The cover doubles as a reading bench. The decor is rustic, isn't it? These are authentic Indian arrowheads, collected on walks with Frida and family hikes. 18 panels in all, 4,728 arrowheads.
Over in the shop, there's lots of them.
As all of you may have guessed by now, they're not here just to add atmosphere. They're functional too, storage space. This workbench is a model of efficiency. The center drawer is fitted with a honing stone for knife sharpening. Varying grades of sandpaper are attached inside the drawer on the left. Coarse, medium, and fine, stacked in the order of their use.
The knife has been the chief tool all the way through. Some funny shaped ones, you know. Sometimes I just had to make a blade for one cut.
Amazing. Mooney began at 2 or 3 in the morning. If he didn't get into the shop until 4, his day was ruined. It was still dark out at that hour, and he was moving from spot to spot as he worked. So he needed lights that could move with him. What you're seeing now is the world's first track lighting system. This little 10 by 12 room was Mooney's castle. He thought everyone should have one. The Fortress hardware is part of the theme.
Mooney spent a good 12 hours a day in this shop, half on knives and half on carving. And grandmother never bothered him when he was in the workshop. This was his kingdom.
Hello, folks. I'm so glad you're spending part of your day with us.
The arrowheads was another hobby. He loved to take the kids to the farmers' fields collecting arrowheads. He loved to be in the shop early in the morning. As most folks know, very peaceful part of the day, and he would be in the shop carving from when he would get up at 2, 3 in the morning till breakfast, and he carved 5 hours a morning, 6 days a week.
Mark, what about some of the equipment that he used? I noticed there's an old Delta Milwaukee drill press back here.
Yes. My granddad carved using hand tools, files, hacksaws, hand drills, draw knives. Here you see a lot of the files, the little hand coping saws. And when he was in his 60s and 70s, in his later years, he complained to my dad that the ivory and the ebony wood was getting tough. My dad bought this drill press. It's the only power tool he ever ended up using, and he did use that in his later years.
Did he actually start the museum himself?
Yes, but not until he was 51 years old. You know, they were kids of Swiss immigrants. His father died when he was young, so by 14 he was working in a steel mill. He had a second grade formal schooling. And this was common 100 years ago for kids not to receive much schooling and to be working in factories. But don't let that second grade education fool you. A reader supreme, just self-taught. And on his own, he studied the math, sciences, philosophies. He quoted the Bible front cover to the back. He even taught himself the carving techniques. His dad died when he was young. He had no one to learn from. No art lessons, no carving lessons. And that's what makes this such an amazing story.
Did he make the handles as well as the metal parts of the carving tools?
Yes. He would actually use soup bones as the white trim on his early trains when he could not afford the ivory in the early going. And so you'll see a lot of handmade tools on these. We still use these. So most of these are original to him. And of course the knife that I showed earlier, I can show a little more up close, and that's an ivory and naval bronze. There's only been 72 of these knives ever made. And this is that knife with a blade that interchanges. There's your finger grip, your index finger. That curve fills your palm. This inside curve comes around this muscle. You can carve for hours with that knife and never end up with a sore hand. And then he tempered a steel that hold the edge on ivory. And he figured it was that good and make a great kitchen knife. And this little shop is where he made his kitchen knives, and that was his living, knife making.
And you still do this today as a knife?
Yes. Our modern shop is downstairs. We'll show you that at the end of the tour. We're in our 4th generation, and we manufacture kitchen knives. Werther knives.
So Mark, what's next on the tour?
We're going into the steel mill room. As a young man, he worked in a steel mill for 24 years, and as an older man, he carved the mills. And the mills truly show his mechanical genius. All of his carvings he made throughout his life work. These trains run, pistons, fly rods, driving arms, and when you see the steel mill running, underneath you'll see from a mirror the mechanics, and it all runs from one motor. And you'll see the eccentrics and the linkages, and it's just amazing when you see this thing run. You'll realize his genius. Okay, folks, these are the steel mills my granddad created. As I mentioned, how he carved everything to work. They are animated. They're all hand carved of ivory and walnut wood. He carved his buddies that he worked with when he was young in the steel mill. You'll even see this man having his lunch where his jaws actually chew the rhubarb pie and Swiss cheese. The engineer falling asleep, the boss waking him up. But this was carved in 1952. It's been running for 60 years. And he even mechanized the carving, which underneath you'll see a mirror, shows all the mechanics.
Now Mark, the mechanics behind this, is there a lot of maintenance behind it, or was it built so well that you guys have to do absolutely nothing to maintain it?
He didn't like to glue. Everything was pinned together. The ivory nuts and bolts all work. My oldest running engine in this building, with no repair, is over 80 years old. So there's not a whole lot to do with these. The leather belts will break at times, and that's really most of the maintenance.
Now talk about the leather belts. Did you really get those from your mom, from your grandma's sewing machine?
Yes, he did. And many times she would go to her sewing machine to find belts and motor gone. And on all these trains you see running, the steel mills, it's all run with leather sewing machine belts and a series of pulleys and mechanics in which he created.
So I take it as a running family joke even between your grandfather and your grandmother?
Oh yes, yes, and she truly did put up with a lot and without a lot. And you know, they could have been millionaires selling what we have here. They refused offers from Henry Ford, the New York Central Railroad. They just loved a simple life. They had time to create their hobbies and make a living. These people lived 20 lifetimes in one. We carved that pair of pliers with the 10 cuts, 32 cuts into a block this shape, a triple set of pliers. With that in mind, growing a little bit, a larger block with 82 cuts, and that opens up to 7 pliers. And pliers was something my granddad considered whittling. It really had no purpose. It was just fun to make, but it had no purpose. And the ultimate in whittling for him was the pliers tree. Designing a block this size and shape, placing 31,000 cuts into a block exactly like this, without making a shaving, it opened to a tree of 511 interconnecting pliers. And that's the famous tree of pliers. And if you would close all those pliers, much like this small one, that tree would actually close back to a shape this exact size.
What type of wood do you use in that, Mark?
The tree of pliers was walnuts, 10 times harder wood.
How long did it take him to carve something like that?
This took him in the summer of 1913, 1 hour a day for 64 days. 64 hours to create that tree. Yes.
Now you and your family have obviously carried down the tradition of carving for future generations.
Yes.
Tell us about that and how that makes you feel and what's next in going forward with teaching others.
Well, my dad and granddad thoroughly believed you can't teach anyone anything until they have the desire to learn. So as we grew up with this, if we had no interest, they didn't waste their time. But as soon as we stepped in that shop and said, hey, how would you do this? Or I tried this way, they would drop anything they were working on and stick with you. So up until just a few years ago, I would still work with my dad every day. My kids are now here. I even have a son-in-law that's taken a great interest, and I've worked with him, teaching him how to carve ivory and ebony. We still carve the pliers for all the kids. We have all kinds of our own projects, like for my granddaughter, doll beds and jewelry boxes. So the wood shop is a very active shop. We have 4th generation taking a love for it, working in it, and as they take an interest, we work with them.
One of Mooney Warther's mottos was, build everything to last forever. That meant families, too. This was a man who loved his wife and partner, Frida, and adored children, his own and everyone else's. He gave as much energy, time, love, and imagination to them as he did to his work. Frida created beautiful Swiss gardens around the house and workshop. The gardens are still planted and maintained by the Warther family to this day. The palette of colors surrounded by oceans of green is dazzling on a summer's day. Frida also collected buttons, thousands of all types, some of historic significance and others that were whimsical, or just appealed to her artistic eye. Frida conceived the designs for the button and arrowhead displays seen in the workshop and later in the button house. With his marriage to Frida and the construction of his workshop in 1912, Mooney transitioned from whittler to carver.
People often ask, what's the difference between whittling and carving? Well, to Pop, whittling was a little bit on the aimless side. You try this, you try that. The plier tree was this classic example. When he finished that, he said, that is the end of whittling. Now he said, I'm going to carve. And in carving, he'd leave something behind for future generations to enjoy, be inspired by. He started carving the history of the steam engine.
Now, Mark, let's talk a little bit about your granddad and him being named Master Carver and a little bit of history of the Swiss background.
Okay. Well, my granddad, as a young man, worked in a steel mill. And in his spare time, he carved 15 of these trains. This is one of those original 15. The New York Central Railroad discovered them, took them out of the mill, put them in New York City for 2 years. These carvings were on display in the Grand Central Terminal. And at that time, passion carvers from Oberammergau, Germany, viewed the carvings, and met my granddad. And because of the mechanics that he had built into all of these, moving parts, and the way that he came up with this, they said they could not duplicate it, and they gave him the title World's Master Carver.
And this is back in
1923.
Now, there's many round items on this train, and from what I understand, your dad did not own a lathe. How did he get such perfect shapes in the round construction?
His ability to keep things round was amazing. And on this, you'll even see ivory rims with wood spokes. There are 50 pieces in a wheel put together. They're not turned on a lathe. And I even have a video I can show you of him draw knifing a boiler of a steamer and filing it to a perfect round shape.
Now, did he use any kind of jigs to do that, or was this strictly freehand?
Freehand, yes.
That's amazing.
Yep. This is walnut and ivory, and some carvings have an abalone pearl trim. This particular one does not. But your pistons, fly rods, driving arms are all timed to work together. Inside the cabs, you can even see how all those pieces work. In fact, one time we had a cab apart and I touched a dial, an ivory dial, and the needle in the dial went around. You probably won't believe that one. But even up here, your headlight cover actually opens up where you can see the headlight inside.
Right.
And so, yeah, everything's hinged. All these little white dots are ivory rivets that hold the carvings together. The nuts and bolts are ivory.
Now, do you remember as a young boy your grandfather doing these items?
I was too little. When he was doing his last good work, I was only this big. But I was blessed where I was working with my dad every day up until just a few years ago. He had spent his life with his dad. Now my kids are here, so it's been handed down through the family.
How young was David your father, when he started, and how young were you?
Well, my dad, I got pictures of him making things in the shop with his dad when he was 4 or 5 years old. I have a knife that he made when he was 6 years old. His first knife is when he was 6. I can remember being down here in our shops, 6, 7, 8 years old, running the machines and making stuff. And in those days, when you got cut and needed stitches, they just took you up to Doc's office and they stitched you up.
There you go. Yeah. Well, what's next on our tour, sir?
The history of the steam locomotive. 64 steamers carved in ivory, ebony, and walnut, and they all work.
Well, let's go check it out.
Let's go look at it. My granddad would get up quite early. He was in that shop 2, 3 in the morning. He'd carve till breakfast, 5 quiet hours. And he found that 5 quiet hours a day, 6 days a week, he would make 1,000 pieces a month. An 8,000-piece ivory and ebony train done in 8 months' time. Everything in this room showing the history of the steam engine was carved between the age of 28 and the age of 68. So it was 40 years of early morning hours. He still had time every day to make a living, play with the kids, have a beer with his buddies, travel. These people lived 20 lifetimes in one.
When did he sleep?
One of those kind of guys didn't need a whole lot of sleep.
Obviously.
He was, up early, but he was to bed relatively early. He would usually get 5, 6 hours a night, and with a cat nap every day after lunch, that's all he needed.
How have you carried on that tradition in your own family, the closeness? Obviously, growing up in the last 4 generations, you guys are tight. You've put this and kept this all together. What's the key of the success in the family knit unit?
Boy, that's a good question. And I had no idea if I was going to have anyone here from the 4th generation, and I have 7 now. They just kept showing up. But, like I said earlier, as they would take an interest, just take the time with them. And it's always about just spending time. And it seemed to work.
Family members have taken this under their wing as well.
Yes. And like I said, I have a son, a daughter, a son-in-law, nephews, nieces, all here now full-time out of college. Some work in the knife factory and in the wood shops. Some are more in the management. Some are working with me in the original shop where we have the original tools that we do the repair work with the trains and carve. So it's just as each one took an interest in whatever they wanted to do, we were there to work with them.
Now, the next room we're about to see are more trains, but this is a different age of when your grandfather created this.
Yes. When my granddad was in his 70s and 80s, kids were raised naturally. Dad took over the knife-making business, and he was finally able to do...
More time for Grandpa.
Right. What he waited his whole life to do.
Sure.
Carve full-time. So the last room, they're 8-foot trains, they're solid ivory and ebony. They were the most productive carving years of his life.
One of today's modern woodworkers does the old-fashioned thing, Roy Underhill.
Yes.
And he visited you and your grandfather some time ago, right?
I don't know if he met my granddad, but I met him just about a year ago.
What did Roy think about all of this?
He told me that he was only here that day to see what's here and that he was coming back. So he must have been impressed.
Now, some of the creations, though, and the time it took to create them, you guys talked about that.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. And, you know, it just, it floors everybody that comes here. How could someone get this much done and still have time to lead a normal life? And it really goes back a lot, believe it or not, to time management. He spent 5 hours a day carving. Today's national average to stare at a TV is 6 hours a day.
Now, you carved Roy a pair of those pliers.
Mm-hmm.
What did he have to say about that and your timing?
He was watching me carve that, and I said, well, you've seen these made before, Roy, haven't you? And he says, oh, yes. He says, I actually have a gentleman that has come on my show and made them, and it takes about 20 to 25 minutes for him to make one. You just made that in 20 seconds. I said, well, yeah, but I'm slow. My granddad could make them in 10 seconds. So he was pretty impressed with that.
Well, Mark, let's go over and check out the next room,
Yes.
and then on to the wood shop.
Yes. I'd just like to say one other thing.
Sure.
I mentioned the TV time. We let the kids know there's good TV. You just have to get picky what you're watching and how much.
Well, obviously that pickiness has to be just a woodworking show.
Of course, the best of the woodworking shows. So great.
We're in the ivory room where we have the Lincoln funeral train, and your grandfather had a great fascination with Abraham Lincoln. Tell us why.
He was very young when his dad died. Chose Lincoln as a father image, loved Lincoln's philosophies, his ideas. He read every book ever written on Lincoln. And from very early carvings to one of his latest, he was at times carving Lincoln items.
What was your grandfather's fascination also with trains?
Well, he was looking for a purpose to carve. And in his day, the steam engine was the most modern invention of all time. He loved to carve in mechanics. And what had more mechanics than a steam engine? And steam, he felt, advanced civilization more than any other invention and was never used for warfare. So he just put that all together and decided, wow, this is the thing to carve. He just loved them.
Your grandfather also had a great love for American history, specifically the Civil War.
Yes.
Behind us, he has some other carvings, some stick canes, obviously reflecting the love of Abraham Lincoln, and the story about Mrs. Bixby losing 5 sons in a war. Tell us a little bit about the tradition and the connection with your grandfather.
Well, as I mentioned, he was young when his dad died,
Right.
so he was a big history buff, a Civil War buff, and that particular carving, the Bixby carving, was actually carved at the age of 24 years old. It's all one plank of wood. It has the letter Lincoln wrote to Mrs. Bixby. It has her carved in it with the 5 graves of her 5 sons, and it came out of a time period that he just loved to study.
Now, we've got a picture over here of your grandfather, and he died at the age of 87. The last train that he carved showing there is the Baltimore and Ohio. What was the feeling of loss and then the future of this place, going forward? What was that whole feeling like and just that carving loss gone?
Well, my dad's lifetime goal was the preservation. And yes, my granddad was the artist and my grandparents were the collectors. He kept it all together. And it's like everything else in life, he taught my dad's taught us, and that's the art of life, to have the next generation hopefully pick it up or work with it. And we have.
In closing, what would you say is the biggest lesson that you and your family have learned? And what does it mean to you guys for the woodworkers out there? What would you say to them with everything that you know, everything you've been through? What would you tell those folks, inspirationally?
Well, probably a couple of little things, but one, people would say to my granddad, after looking at these amazing carvings, this is patience. And he would say, oh no, patients are in hospitals. This is love. And to start something at 5 years old and still be working on it at 85, you gotta love it. And you just have to find what you love to do in life and just do it for the love of it.
Mark, thank you so much for the tour.
Thank you.
We appreciate it very much, and for Woodcraft and all its followers out there. Whether this helps you make woodwork, hopefully it inspires you for sure. So thanks for tuning in, and take care.
At the age of 68, Pop had felt he completed the history of the steam engine. The diesel was here, He said he wouldn't carve a diesel if he lived to be 1,000 years old. He had no love for them whatsoever. And for 4 years, he kept active. Oh, he was always busy doing something. He did a lot of work in the knife making, and mainly one of the wood boxes, wood cases. He liked doing that. Retirement isn't for everybody, and Pop was one of them, and I could see it. And I talked him into going back into carving, although the steam engine's dead. I said, you've been a history buff all your life on railroad history. Carve the history of the railroads. And he did.
Carved out of solid ivory, his tribute to the great events in railroad history showed his love for the steam engines and his admiration for Abraham Lincoln. His sense of humor plays into the driving of the golden spike carving, where President Grant is seen standing on the tracks smoking a cigar. Though Grant was never actually present, Mooney argued that it was an important event in American history and he should have been there. So there Grant stayed. With the Lady Baltimore, Mooney fulfilled his final promise.
In 1970, he decided to start with Lady Baltimore. He always said he wanted to leave something behind unfinished because he felt everybody should do something creative and you should do it as far as you could go. And that was as far as Pop could go. So that is his unfinished piece, and that's the way he wanted it.
You know, one time Abraham Lincoln said that if you intend to go to work, start right where you are, for there is no better place. And then go straight ahead and never suspect that anybody's trying to hinder you. And any man can make a success of himself if you work that way. So that's where I got my philosophy from old Abraham Lincoln.